Hey everyone, and welcome to this Career Lab video. My name is Katie. I'm a peer career advisor at Career Lab, and today we're going to be going over Aiden's resume to turn it into the best resume possible and work with what they've got so far. So with this resume here, we can see that this one student has a bunch of really great experiences, but he's not really presenting them in the best way. So let's go through top to bottom. I'll say what stands out. We'll reorder it together. And then at the end, we'll address the formatting of it. So to start off, we have Aiden's resume. Aiden is a sophomore at Brown, interested in the social determinants of access to education, community engagement, and social research through data. These are all really great things, and you could see them right here in the skill section. It's great for us to know, but this is something in the skill section right here that let's demonstrate this like through other things. Let's show their interest in social determinants, in the kind of work that they want to do through the way that this is ordered. Well, a resume at its very basic level is just kind of a list of what you've done. There are ways to craft a narrative out of what you've done to show that as you're applying for things, that you're interested in certain things and that you have relevant skills that strengthen your interest and strengthen your candidacy for the kind of work that you like to do. So yeah, to start off, we have Aiden's name, their address, their contact info. This is all great. As a header, this is clean. It's easy to read. The formatting in general is very clean. It's organized. And while the ordering is a bit different than the way that we recommend at Career Lab, it is very readable. And those are things that are important. You never want an employer to look at a resume that has a bunch of really great stuff on there, but not know what to look at. You want it to do the job for them and present the material to them in a way that's very easily understandable. So with this skill section, I'm going to recommend moving this to the bottom. And instead of outright saying who they are and what they're interested in, instead, we're going to show that elsewhere. So to start off, we're moving the skill section down to the very bottom. And we're just going to take out the sentence. And that's tough because, again, this is like their ethos sentence. But at the end of the day, that's something that they'll demonstrate through their other experiences. And then here we have a bunch of skills. We have both soft skills and hard skills. We recommend only listing hard skills. Soft skills are things that can be demonstrated through your past experiences. So here we have leadership, swimming, and office management. Great skills to have. Let's demonstrate that elsewhere. Let's demonstrate that through the experiences that gave them these leadership skills, swimming skills, and office management skills. So we're going to delete that too. And then this is going to become a technical skills section in which they're proficient in Microsoft Office, Google Suite, and Stata, all great programs that are useful for the kind of work they want to do. And then we're going to turn this into a skills and interest section and include some interest. And these are things that if in an interview Aiden is asked about these, they would love to talk about them. These can include things like hiking or water skiing, cooking, reading, nonfiction mystery novels, stuff like that. Things that if, in an interview, an employer is like, wow, like I saw that you're really into harmonica playing. Aiden could be like, yes, like I've been playing the harmonica since I was a kid. It's one of my passion projects. I am actually like a classically trained harmonicaist. And that's something that could be the start of a conversation and show off their personality, show who they are. So here, I'm going to list Aiden's harmonica skills, vegan baking skills, non-fiction mystery novels, and backcountry interests. And those are all things that, again, list things that you think are interesting. Don't feel like you have to, find the most esoteric interest out there, but include things that you'd really love to talk about. So once we have that down there, it's important to list these here because these are things, this is where employers would look for them. We're also going to add a language section here because this is also where employers will look for them. You don't need to include English. If your resume is in English, it's implied that you're proficient in English. But let's say Aiden has native proficiency in Spanish. Include Spanish, native proficiency, or fluent proficiency, or if they're not fully proficient, but they're able to hold a conversation, they can say, conversational fluency. So down here, skills and interests, it's where employers will look for them, and it's the best place to put them. So to go back up to the top, we now have the work experience first. And then while that's something that you'll see a lot in postgraduate resumes, where your most relevant experience are your past professional experiences, as an undergrad, it's more important to instead have your undergrad experience as your first section. So we're going to move this education section, which right now is towards the bottom of the resume, and we're going to move that to be the first thing they see, because as a student, a full-time student, Aiden's experience at Brown is their most relevant experience, and it's given them the most applicable skills. It's what they do most of the day, and thus it deserves a place at the very top of the resume. So to go into this section, this looks good. We're going to play around a bit more with the formatting right now, later on, because it does take up a lot of space. There is a lot of white space here. And while white space is useful in kind of breaking things down, keeping it readable, right now we just have way too much white space. There's white space here. There's just things that are taking up so much space. And right now, this resume is 2 pages, where the goal is to cut it down to 1. But we'll do that later on. Right now, looking at this, it's good in terms of they have their concentration listed clearly. They don't have their GPA, and that's all right. We recommend including it if it's around a 3.5 or above, and if you think it reflects the work that you've done at Brown and reflects well on you. If it's something that doesn't really reflect the work that you've done at Brown, or something that might not fully capture the hard work that you've done during your time here, then you don't have to include it. But if they wanted to, they could. Let's say GPA, Aiden has a 3.7. They include it there. Again, this is where employers will look for it. Here they have their time at Brown. It's implied that they're graduating in May 2023. And again, this is consistent with the way that they have this for their other experiences, which is good. It makes it readable. When employers see this, they'll see, okay, the dates are here for this one. Let's expect to see the dates there for the other ones. This is something that we might change later on when we look at the formatting. And again, they have selected coursework in their education section. And as a student who's interested in social research, in nonprofit work, then a bunch of these classes are useful, but then there are some that are not as relevant. And with a resume, the key judgment as to whether you should include something is whether it's relevant to what you're applying for. So while Intro to Creative Nonfiction and Astronomy and Astrophysics are classes that are extremely interesting, and I'm sure were a valuable part of Aiden's time at Brown, instead, let's focus on things like intro stats for social research. For social research work, that's incredibly useful, incredibly relevant, and shows that they've done things at Brown that apply to the work they want to do in the future. Similarly, macro-organizational theory for nonprofit organizations, that could be really useful to have. Scientific computing and problem solving, that's something that may be useful. Maybe it's less directly relevant as social research, but if they plan on doing social research with data, and that's something that they learned in this class, then they should definitely include it. So really up until here, these 3 classes are really great. And then the ones beyond these are good. These are important classes, and I'm sure that they, took a lot of work. But in the context of the kind of work that Aiden's interested in doing in like social determinants of health, social determinants of access to education, kind of social research with data, these are things that don't necessarily apply. So we can just delete it. And while it can be hard, because these may be really great classes, again, if they're really into astrophysics, maybe that could be an interest. Put it down here. If an employer does want to see all the classes you've taken at Brown, they'll ask your transcript. So don't worry if you feel like you have to list everything here. while it could be great, employers aren't expecting to see it here. And if you do throw it all in, it might kind of detract from other classes that are super relevant and have given you skills that you will directly apply to the work that you're doing. All right. So to go into sort of like the bulk of the resume, like the real meat of it, is the experience section. So if your education section explains what you're doing right now, kind of the work that you're doing most of the time as a full-time student, your work experience complements that by showing skills that you've developed through other past experiences. And these can include things on campus. Here, Hayden has their experience as a MIC on campus. And as the captain of club swimming on campus. Those are both campus experiences. We have a research assistant experience on campus, and then we have an internship and a lifeguarding experience. All things that are relevant and have given them skills that they'll apply in their future settings. But right now, they're sort of organized in a way that doesn't fully emphasize the importance of them and the relevance of them in this setting. Again, relevancy is key when it comes to a resume. So right now, they're separated into work experience and academic experience. And that's a delineation that we see a lot at Career Lab. We have students come in and they're like, well, I only have 2 experiences that were actual work experiences. The rest of my experiences were just things that I did on campus. And again, it's like just like when you're on campus as a full-time student, anything that you do in addition is great and is a valuable experience. And sometimes as an undergrad, your most valuable experiences will be things that you did on campus because again, you're given a level of responsibility on campus as a leader, as someone who's involved with different organizations that you might not get to do in your time off campus or over the summer. So while this delineation, this kind of implies, these are experiences that they were paid for, these are things that they volunteered for. While the delineation could be useful, in this context, when they're applying to do social research, what matters more is whether they have social research experience. And it's clear that they do. They have this really cool sociology experience in which they're researching federal housing projects on Providence's Asian American population, something that's really interesting and is kind of implied to relate to the kind of work they want to do in the future. But right here, it's the 4th thing that they have, and it's in the second section. So the way to move it up is to instead turn this first experience section into a social research experience section. And this Crossroads experience, their internship, is super useful. It's super relevant, and it's really, it's something that does really apply to the work they want to do. So that this can stay here. But now is Mount Hope YMCA experience, while it's something that they were paid for, now that we've renamed the section, it doesn't really apply. But it still is relevant, and it still is worth keeping on the resume. But instead, this can be moved into this section, which we're now going to rename a leadership and community engagement experience. So this is going to move down here, and I believe chronologically it would work here. Yeah. And again, we say to list things in reverse chronological order, which is again is intuitive for employers. It's how they'll expect to see it. So now that we have the social research experience section, we're going to move this up there. And now this is still reverse chronological order. This makes sense. And now these experiences, all we did was move them around, but they make more sense. And again, they make more of an argument for the skills that they have and the skills that they'll bring. Now this experience is no longer the fact that they worked in an office. It's now the fact that they're doing social research. So now that we've done these and we've grouped them by the section, the thing is, the job now is to go into these bullet points and see, again, how these bullet points and the things that they're talking about in these experiences relate to the experience that they're arguing they have. So in this section, the focus on this experience is really social research. That's what really matters for this time at Crossroads. So we're going to really focus on that when we go through these bullet points. So to start off, this bullet point in particular really stands out to me, in which they sat in on strategy meetings with their boss, who is the head of casework management. That means they're really exposed to the necessities of casework management at a nonprofit like Crossroads. And if they want to do work like that in the future, having that familiarity is really useful. So let's like really emphasize that. So they sat in kind of implies that it was passive. Through a conversation with Aiden, it seems like they were more active than that they kind of got more information out of it. They learned from it. They didn't just sit there and passively watch, that they were asked questions. So they can say that they engaged with, and even though, they might not have been with, the leadership team, if they sat in on the meeting and gained stuff from it, engaged with it, that's still like, engaging with it, even if they might not be spearheading it. So engaged with strategy staff meetings with their boss. I'd recommend saying the name of the boss. Like X this person, so they can again say who it was. If they have that person listed on their references, and that kind of goes more into the relationship with them. Always good to like reference who you're talking about or what you're talking about to make it clear. And for this, like, let's kind of like break this down even more. Like, what were these staff meetings, strategy meetings on? And how did casework management work into this? So, they engage with strategy staff meetings with my boss, that are casework management, discussing like summer initiatives with the local food bank and planning ahead for the fall fundraising calendar. So just by adding that, we get a much better idea of the kind of work that they did. And that's always really useful, by demonstrating that they got stuff out of it and specific things out of it, even if like the work that they're applying for might not ever partner with a local food bank and might have a different fundraising calendar, might fundraise in a different way. These details help us get a good idea of what they did at this in this opportunity. And they work towards quantifying this experience. Quantifiers are always really useful. And if you ever have the ability to add in a number, add in a relevant statistic that goes towards the size and the impact of your experience, then definitely do. So even here, these can be bi-weekly strategy staff meetings. That goes towards the level of work. These were held twice a week. They went to them twice a week. This wasn't just something that they did like 2 times over the summer that they did. This is something that was regular. And because that bullet point is the most relevant, we're going to move that to be first, and apply that same thing to the next couple of bullet points. Again, quantify, talk about the work that you did, really like fill it out. Give us a good idea of what you did to demonstrate why it's relevant. So they answered phone calls and filed paperwork. What kinds of phone calls? Phone calls with Crossroads clients, families, and partners, and filed casework on food stamp applications and federal housing funding. Those are things that are super specific. It's not just paperwork. They really name it. They give it. They help quantify what it was, and file casework daily. Now we get a really good idea of the work that they did there. Last bullet point, they called up local businesses to see if they're interested in partnering with Crossroads and fundraising events. What came out of this? Let's talk about the accomplishments of something they did. A framework that we have at Career Lab is the APR framework, Action, Process, Results. So when you're talking about something that you did, a good way to think about it is if you took an action, what was a process that you took for that action, and then what was the result of it. So here, the action is reaching out to local partners. The process is calling up local businesses, but we don't have anything about the result. So we can add something in saying that they called up local businesses. We have the A and the P, and the R is that, they're resulting in 5 partnerships with local restaurants during the summer of 2020. And that already is so much more filled out. We get a much better idea of what this experience was, and it's so much more relevant now because we have that really good understanding of this kind of work. So yeah, let's keep applying that to these bullet points. I'm just going to go through and kind of add them. But again, it's like adding quantifiers, using that APR framework, and this is all going to work towards the relevancy of these bullet points and the relevancy of these experiences. So for this one, they helped gather interview data from research project by conducting with local residents and community leaders. That's something that's much more fleshing it out just a little bit more, giving us a good idea. They use data to examine data on a neighborhood basis, running zip code based regression models on data from the study, published findings in a research paper to be published in XYZ magazine in summer 2021. And once that's published, they can name the magazine, even link out to it or include a citation of it. That's something that's really cool. Like research papers, those are all really relevant, really goes again towards their social research experience. And then to go into these experiences, what matters in your kind of like additional experience section are those soft skills. So they said at the beginning that they have these soft skills, but let's demonstrate that. Here, the soft skills we're really focusing on is our leadership and community engagement. Those are things that are super useful in nonprofit work. It might not be directly relevant in that it's not in a nonprofit setting, but that doesn't mean that these skills won't be used. And it doesn't matter. It means that it still matters that they develop them in their past experiences. So going into this MIC experience, here, their bullet points are a little funky. We always recommend that you start off a bullet point with an active verb. So instead of saying I advise, let's say just advise. So they advise first-year students with courses, concentrations, and getting started at Brown. To do so, they held weekly meetings with them over Zoom and met bi-weekly. So these two bullet points could really just be one sentence. We have like the action, and then we have like the process, the second bullet point. Let's combine them, save up space. So instead, it'll say that they advise first-year students with X, Y, and Z. And this can instead say holding weekly meetings with them over Zoom and met bi-weekly with my assigned advisor to discuss each student's progress. I think that seems to sum up their MIC experience. It shows leadership, it shows community engagement, it talks about the action and the process. Here, the result is more just relationship building, which they can include if they want to, but this seems to sum it up really well. All right, so going on to this experience, their club swimming experience, this is something that's really valuable. Doing a sport or any kind of extracurricular on top of being a full-time student is really tough. So if they're able to maintain this commitment, that really speaks volumes to their level of time management, their level of responsibility, and their commitment to something more than themselves. So even though it's not nonprofit work, it's something that's super relevant and again goes towards this leadership and community engagement skills that they're demonstrating in this section. So in this bullet point, they kind of start off by talking a bit more about their individual commitment, about how they practice 3 times a week, attended local meets, and then the second part of the bullet point is more about their leadership. So, it's still relevant to talk about their individual experience. So we're going to divide this into 2 different bullet points. So it's no longer just one. And how this first one be them, second one is leadership. So it's good to flesh out the first one a little bit more. In this one, we're going to talk more about how they won, like an accomplishment that they have, how they won Rhode Island State Championships in fall 2019 for the Butterfly 400. I am not a swimmer, so again, I'm just kind of positing something that they could accomplish, but that's something to include. Again, it's not nonprofit work, but that is something that takes a lot of time, and that's a skill that is applicable in any setting, especially nonprofit work. The second one, again, is going to go more towards your team management skills, leadership skills, organization. They organized, let's say, weekly team meetings as captain, and was elected captain sophomore year. So they organized weekly team meetings as captain, both in person and then over Zoom, starting in 2020, and was elected captain sophomore year by the team. That again is, is something from their peers demonstrating their skills. It's something that speaks volumes to them, and it's a good thing to include. Then lastly, they have this lifeguard experience, which, is still relevant. It's might not be the second thing that they should list in their resume, but it is something that goes towards, again, leadership and community engagement. And you can really see that in these bullet points, and you can see where they can flesh this out a bit more. Similar to the one before, this one is more about their individual things. They coached junior swimming program and taught kids to swim and to race. That's something that's great. They could say, taught kids to swim and race with daily lessons over the 6-week summer program. Again, quantifying it, they can say coach junior swimming program over the summer to around 25 kids each week, and taught those kids to swim race. Again, responsibility is something that's, gives us a better idea of what they were doing. It's not just that they taught kids, it's the size of the program, it's the commitment of it. It's the responsibilities that managing 25 kids takes, which are a lot. And again, we're going to fix this bullet point to say organized local community events with the swimmers, with fellow colleagues as part of the Learn to Swim outreach program. You could say bringing in local Providence residents for free swim clinics, which is something that's really important. Again, I think this one, it kind of goes towards their interest in social research and maybe the social determinants of access to education, access to swim education. That's something that's kind of implied when they're talking more about this community engagement. That's something that's, again, like this experience is not just like their summer job. It's something that's gone towards their passion for this kind of research, their passion for community engagement. Lastly, we have their awards section, and while these awards are things they should all be proud of, these first 3 awards are things that are just left over from high school. And at this point, they have chosen to take their high school experience off their resume. And that's a personal choice. It's definitely recommended to keep it on for a couple years after, because it's still really relevant. That's, a good number of years of your life that have given you skills. But after a certain point, if you feel like it's not relevant, then it's not worth keeping up the space for things that are more recent and more relevant. Which means that if they've taken away their high school experience section entry itself, then they shouldn't still hold on to these past awards from high school. So we're going to delete this. But they have this really cool commended research fellowship grant, which is really great, super relevant. Again, goes towards the caliber of their research. But instead of listing it here and having its own section that kind of takes up space, let's instead list it with their Brown experience. So I could say awarded this award in 2020. And if it's for, say, this experience, you can list it here again. Kind of cross-reference it, make it clear how they got it. So awarded this fellowship for research conducted with Professor Carberry, which is great. Maybe this was a size, they can say of, $2,000, something like that, up to them. If it was, attendance at a symposium, that's great. But again, it makes more sense there, and it's more relevant there. Versus down here, it's sort of on its own, and it's not given the context it deserves. Overall, we now have a resume that's definitely a lot more fleshed out, that we have a much better idea of the work that Aiden did and why it matters, why it's relevant, why it's important, and why it's given them skills that they now want to apply in a nonprofit setting. And that's really important. Something that we talk a lot about at Career Lab, especially with the Careers in the Common Good program, is that nonprofit work might have less of a delineated path towards it than some other fields, where it's really clear that, you get this internship, that internship, and you get this job. Nonprofit work can take a lot of different skills from a lot of different areas. And here it's really important to demonstrate the skills that they have, even if that comes from a wide variety of different settings. So we have this really good resume. Our job now is just to fit it onto one page, and this is just formatting. These are things like, going here, going into the spacing, go into custom spacing. Before, let's move this down to 0 and see how that looks. And that's really hard to read. So instead, we can go here, move it back to, say, 6. And again, this is sort of just pausing and seeing what would work. Right now, we're still not quite onto one page, but I know it's possible. This can mean things like, for this experience, for this entry, this kind of takes up a lot of space. So instead, maybe we can move their concentration down a line, put this here, and then move these here. That's something they have on each line. And by moving the time entry up a little bit, they can then do this for the rest of them. Because again, with whatever you do with formatting, it's best to keep it consistent. Because once you do it one time, then employers will expect to see it there every other time. And again, by doing this, you save up a line each time. Might be a bit tight to do here. So instead, we're going to turn this into a comma, and then we can add a bit more space. Again, this is something that they can really play around with. They can change up if they don't like the look of it after some amount of time. But you can see how just doing something like that means they can still include all of the stuff that we added, which is really great. That you don't want to feel like your resume is kind of constricting you from doing what you want to do. We have a resume template available on the CareerLab website, which is really great. That fits a ton of stuff in. And if you're just getting started with the resume, that's a perfect place to start. Aiden potentially really likes the way that their resume looks. They don't want to use the template, and that's great. But let's still make it sure that it fits onto one page. And it does now, just by doing a small change like that. So again, if you feel like, oh, like my resume is over 2 pages, start looking first if you can change the formatting rather than trying to cut away stuff. That could be really important. And again, let's try and really make each thing stand out so it's easy to read. But overall, it seems like this has done a really good job of highlighting the relevant skills and going towards the thing that they originally had in that sentence at the very top and demonstrating it by crafting a narrative, just by listing things in a certain way. All right, so we can see before us, we have the 2 versions of the resume, the one that we had in the beginning and the one that we worked through together. You can see just visually, the main difference is that it's on one page. Again, that's really important for a resume. But in general, it's still readable. We didn't change with the fonts that much. We did kind of add that extra right-hand column with the dates to make more space. That's not necessarily the way to do it, but in this case, it really helped us fit everything onto one page. And again, it's being creative. While this is really readable now and looks so much better, this is not necessarily the way to do it. Resumes are things that are supposed to reflect yourself. So present it in a way that you think looks best, but keep it readable, keep it simple. And again, keep it onto one page. Thank you so much to everyone for coming through this process with me and going through Aiden's resume together. I hope you've all learned a lot. Going through a resume and getting started with a resume or working on one that you've already got can be tough. But as a PCA, we're here to help. Hopefully this video was helpful. If you still have questions or if you have anything else that PCAs can help with, please come by open hours. They're all listed on Handshake, or email the PCAs at peercareeradvisors@brown.edu for any questions at all. The career process can be tough, but we're more than happy and we're here to help with any questions that you have along the way.